what I do. I'd expect a whole lot of love out of you. You got to treat me good, and I'll be good to you. There's a whole lot of things you and I could do, baby. Beautiful when you get right down to it, yeah. You're beautiful, and I wouldn't change one thing about you, yeah. Oh, 'cause you're beautiful. I don't mind telling the world about you, yeah. You're beautiful. And what about the way you love me? And the way you squeeze me. Simply beautiful. You're beautiful. When you needed me, yeah, I was right there by your side. Simply beautiful. You're beautiful. I wouldn't change nothing about you, yeah. 'Cause you're beautiful. Yeah. When you get right down to it, when you get right down to it, yeah. When you get right down to it, oh, you're beautiful. I don't mind the world knowing about you. You're beautiful. And I don't care what the magazines say. I don't care what the magazines say. Yeah. You're beautiful.
Good morning. Good
Simply
morning.
beautiful.
This is Tasha here with the show I Do, I Did, I Don't on What's in It for the Black People Media. Good morning to those who are joining. We are in for a good show today as we talk about from the male perspective. And so as folks are joining, I want you to make sure that you like the page, that you share the page, share the broadcast. Make sure that you're liking What's in It for the Black People Media, as well as I Do, I Did, I Don't. Should be a great show this morning. I'm excited. I am excited. It's been great to be with you, to have several different shows to talk about divorce from different perspectives. So this show, as you know, I Do, I Did, I Don't, is about helping folks to thrive and to understand the divorce process, to walk through it with more knowledge, to care for yourselves, to care for your family, if you have a family, and to make sure that you're making it through the process in a way that is going to strengthen you on the other side of the divorce. While we talk about those things, we'll also talk a little bit about several other items that just relate to ancillary things around divorce, like attorneys and caring for yourself, and just how people have gone through the process. So today, my guest is Mikal Harris. He is going to be joining us, and we're going to talk about divorce from the male perspective. Mikal is, we'll bring him on, and I'll tell you a little bit about him, and I'll let him tell you more about himself. You know, what's interesting is we went to both high school and college together. And you know how you just lose touch with people after a while? You haven't necessarily had a lot of discussion. And I had no idea that this brother is doing all of the things that he is doing. So, Mikal is a licensed clinical professional counselor as well as a pastor. He has a ministry that is Bodybuilders Ministry, and he himself experienced divorce. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about his happily ever after now because he is married with 3 children. Right.
Yes,
Okay. I was like, wait, it's not 4, it's 3. All right. So good morning, Mikal. How are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm good.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We're as folks are joining here. Let me see. We got a small audience starting here right now, but we're gonna keep it on going. Uh, so I want to talk to you about just what you've been doing because it's been a minute since we have really caught up with each other. Like I said, I had no idea that you're doing all the things that you're doing, and that you were an author as well. And so tell us a little bit about kind of what your journey has been, where you are right now, and then we'll get into all the other stuff in a minute.
Well, life is definitely a journey, twists and turns. Um, I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I am a clinical division director at a non-for-profit. We have a human trafficking home. We have just a whole bunch of programs for the community, and I'm responsible for pretty much everything. So I really love what I do professionally. It's all counseling. And then my wife and I, we actually have a marriage organization called Forever Bliss, but it's evolving into something else where we're going to be doing marriage boot camps, marriage, whatever, all things marriage. We're going to be doing that. We do some new experiential processes to help, people overcome their past issues. I actually run these groups for men probably 4 times a year, various parts of the country, and she's getting trained to do that as well. I also have I've started a 501c3 athletic association in Homewood with some other
Wow.
and we have football. We're starting wrestling. We have partnered with a track program. So I just do a lot of community stuff. I'm just into empowering people to get in touch with their emotions, to know how their emotions can either help them create the realities that they want or get them stuck into the realities they hate. Pretty much that is what I do.
All right. Well, that sounds fantastic. That is some work that's very much needed, and I think very much needed and missing for men specifically. So, let's talk about you. When you talk about getting into touch with your emotions and understanding that to create the life that you want and to be able to move forward with something, what? How did you get to that place? Even so, you married early, divorced
Yes.
earlier before you had children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I'm getting some feedback. I don't know if you guys are hearing that, but tell me a little bit about just marrying early and your journey of getting to this place. You're married. What happens to get you to divorce?
Well, the epitome of me getting married was, of course, I gave my life to God when I was in college.
Hmm. I remember that.
And when I gave my life to God in college, it kind of changed my perception of being in a relationship with a woman. So, to be honest with you, my mother, this is going to sound really counterintuitive. My mother raised me to be in a relationship with a lot of women until I found the woman that I wanted to have.
Okay.
But when I gave my life to God, it was like, okay, I can't continuously live this type of life. So I actually left women alone. But then I thought I found somebody because I knew them, Because the biggest mistake we make when we get married is we think because we know someone, that's grounds to marry them. Or we think we know them. So we judge sometimes the length of time that we know people, some kind of way validates us spending the rest of our lives with them. So I ended up giving my life to God. I ended up getting married because basically I didn't want to fornicate. I was the classic example of a person because I wasn't raised in the church. I didn't find God until I was a junior in college.
Okay.
So when I found that out, it was like, okay, I want to be married. So I ended up getting married. And I think I got married for all the wrong reasons looking back on it. Because as a 24, 25-year-old man, I didn't know enough about being a man to actually be married appropriately. Like I didn't know enough about me to be married.
Okay, Mikhail, give me 1 second. We're gonna take a quick break and come back. I think we got a couple of small things to work out. So just take a
Okay,
break.
that's fine.
WIFTBPM.
Church Chicago's Power Hour. I'm your host, Angie Mims, and
Terrence Keys.
TD, aka Terrence Daniels.
I wish I had one witness in the house.
You got one.
Got a couple of them. Got a couple of them.
Two T's.
Give me a testimony.
Oh Lord, he's did it before. Oh Lord,
I got one.
Something
better. I got 5 reasons.
5 reasons. Oh Lord, he turned it around.
Turn it around. He woke me up this morning.
Oh, don't do this. Don't do this.
Go
number
ahead.
4.
He woke me up this morning.
Come on, number 3. Come.
He woke me up.
Oh Lord,
He woke you
that
up.
thing can touch you.
I'm
One
telling
of
you.
them 5s will get you. What's the second one?
He woke me up this morning.
Yes sir. Yes sir.
Oh my God.
And the number 1 reason,
Number 1. Final answer.
he woke me up
He
this
woke
morning.
me up this
He
morning.
woke me up this morning.
That's a testimony.
That's a
Turn that thing
testimony.
Yeah. Ooh. I miss your kiss. Oh, your kiss is one of a kind. It feels so nice. Girl, you do it right. I miss. Ooh. Oh, girl, you don't go too fast. You take your time. Just how I miss. Hey. Oh, you kiss it, then I'm drifting off your love. Keeps me floating, girl. I miss. And ooh, it feels so good. I wanna come down. Girl, I'm missing that love. Come on. Ooh, babe, I'm missing all those kisses. Baby, bring those lips to me. Oh, babe, I'm missing all those kisses. Baby, bring those lips to me. Come on. Oh, when you're not around, girl, I'm tweaking.
Welcome back.
I swear I be hearing things.
This is Tasha with I Do, I Did, I Don't on What's in It for the Black People Media. We are talking to my guest, Mikhail Harris. And Mikhail, before we left, you were talking about getting married and having this Christian perspective as you started your relationship with Christianity and with the church, and feeling like you knew this person and you really didn't want to fornicate, even though your mom sort of gave you this experience.
Yeah.
She gave you this this thought process of, date, experience enough until you find the woman that you want, but you felt like now that you're a Christian, you can't do that. So you found a woman, got married, and the What happened
Well,
next?
I didn't feel like I could do the dating. I think I narrowed my scope and my focus because I thought I knew someone. So I decided that I wasn't going to do that anymore, even though all this, you say I do, I did, and I don't. Well, I shouldn't. I should have known that based on what I was looking at. You know what I'm saying? But I realized that because I didn't know enough about myself, like me as a man, my likes, my dislikes. I wasn't in touch with my emotions then. I didn't do the things that I do now. If I
Right.
had done it over again, just because I didn't know me, I wouldn't have gotten married. It would have been totally separate from that woman.
Right. That's a word because I think a lot of us find ourselves in that situation. And of course, if you're dating somebody, it's the first, what's next? You know, you get married, you have children if you're trying to do it the right way. And so
Hmm.
you don't know enough about yourself. And we're early, you know, a lot of us are marrying earlier. The numbers are starting to change, and it's coming later in life now when we know ourselves a little bit more. In my case, I was a little older. I think I was 27 when I married. And I felt like I knew myself. I knew the person. I knew what I was getting into. And I think I did at the time in some ways, but there were still a lot of things to learn about myself. And I think I was unaware that I had as much to learn about myself. And I hear you saying the same thing.
Yes, I mean, the type of work that I do now, people have to be very intentional. I have to be intentional about learning about myself. A lot of times we only learn things about ourselves when things go wrong. So when things are going right, you're not that introspective. So their life is like we're not intentional about, okay, why do I tick like this? What trauma is when I get an attitude about this? What triggers this? Where does this come from? We don't live like that. We only start to dig for the treasures in us when darkness comes. We don't just normally try to figure out who we are on a daily basis. So until trouble comes, it's like we're totally ignorant to that. So intentionally now I have processes that I do with people and with myself so that this work is continuously done. So it's hard to get taken off guard emotionally when you're prepared, basically.
Right, right. It's I think what you say means you know there's a lot of real truth in that we have to be intentional, but it's not those aren't skills that we learn growing up generally. And so
Yep.
we find ourselves figuring this out as trouble comes in the marriage, and we're starting to learn now these are the things that triggers. This is what I'm even triggered because we don't even recognize that many times until we're moving through a relationship with someone else, and the stakes are kind of high when you're married at that point. I guess it depends on how you look at it. For some of them the stakes are high. For
Yes.
some people they don't feel like the stakes are that high because they're
Right. They don't
married, they got
care.
the person. Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe either you don't know or you don't care. Now we can do something about you don't know part and get you some knowledge, but if you don't care, that's a whole different situation, right? So
Yep.
now you're walking through, you're learning about yourself while you're walking through a relationship, a marriage with someone else, and they too are learning about themselves in the same way because most likely it's not common that people have that level of skill walking into their marriage, especially
Exactly.
earlier on. So now you're bumping against each other. Both of you are trying to figure out and learning about yourselves as you learn about the other person. And hopefully there are no children in the process yet because that just makes it even more difficult. And then you have
No.
finances and everything else. So you're learning about yourself. And I'm curious the trouble came later. And during the marriage, did you feel like you were learning anything about yourself during that time, or did most of the learning come afterwards?
Well, sometimes when I was learning about myself, I didn't know I was learning about myself.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times when I was in a relationship or when people are in relationships, a lot of the issues we have in a relationship are actually about us. But when we're in the relationship, they're about the other person.
Right.
So it's more, well, you said this, you did this, you're not doing this, you're not doing that's just a tug of war. Everybody's saying you. So when I was actually in the relationship, I do think I had some insight about myself, but
Uh-huh.
it wasn't accurate. So it became more about what she was doing to me as opposed to what I was doing to me. Meaning I put my happiness, I put my peace, I put my contentment and my consolation into this individual instead of it already being in me.
Right.
So a lot of things became about what she wasn't doing because I felt like I was void of something when she didn't do it. So I learned that those voids are my responsibility. But when I was in the marriage, I would reach to her for that instead of reaching in me for that or getting that from places in a health, from getting it from the places they needed to come from in a healthy way. So it
Right.
became unhealthy how I was trying to fill these voids with this woman. But I didn't know that while I was in the marriage. I only figured that out after I got out of it and going down the road. So I've been recently is that's kind of loose, but I've changed my perception of my first marriage because of what I've learned about myself.
Okay, so tell us about that. What you changed your perception, and you're making me index back to a discussion we had with Angela Oyafumike, who talked about forgiving yourself
Yeah.
and how that gives you this power to think through what were some of your responsibilities in the marriage. What were those voids? What are those things that you need to fix about you or work on? And it just opens up a whole different understanding
Yeah.
for yourself. So what changed in your perception about what was it before, and then what is it now that it's changed?
Well, I think I went through a shift from deciding I wanted to be a husband to shifting so I want to be a man first. So like you're not going to be a good husband unless you're a good man.
That's
Okay?
correct.
So, so you have people that fail at being a husband, but they're great men. But you'll
Mm-hmm.
very seldom find a bad man who's successful at being a good husband, okay?
Right.
So I had decided that so I'm not one who believes that the longer you stay out of a relationship to heal, the better you're going to be when you get in another one. Because time doesn't heal all wounds. What you do with that time in those wounds is how you get healed.
Right.
Because you can be by yourself for a long time and be just as messed up as you were when you were in a relationship. So what I learned, number one, about myself, one good one was I didn't realize as good of a relationship. So I have a sexual abuse history. I was sexually abused by men and women from the ages of 6 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't realize that that would play out in a marriage. I never did any work around it. I never realized what type of man it made me. I never realized how it affected my desires. So I had to do some work around that. My relationship with my mother is excellent. We're best friends. I love her, but my mother never hugged me and told me she loved me because she
Mm-hmm.
thought my brother needed it more.
Okay.
Okay. So it created a passivity in me to sexual abuse, and it also created a desire to be touched all the time, a desire, an inordinate affection to be, how can I say, affirmed
Right. Right.
by a woman. I needed what I perceived to be a strong woman because I had flaws in me that actually made me at the core feel like a weak man. So I was marrying for strength. I was marrying for to get some of these voids filled. And I realized I was totally out of touch with how I felt.
Mm.
I'm talking about in each moment of my life, I was out of touch with that. So when me and her would engage, I don't know that what I'm trying to get from her is in order. Like she's trying to give me something that my mother didn't give me, that people had taken from me, and all of this stuff that happened. I mean, it's a lot more to it, but all this stuff that happened to me into my life, when you end up getting married, the person you're married to ends up having to give you all of that. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't know that that's why you're asking, it's a no-win for the other person.
Right. If you haven't done that work to understand what
Yeah.
to process the trauma or to understand who you are and how your life and your history and your family systems and all of that has shaped you, then you're leaning on the other person to help you do that or to even point it out to you, and you just don't know. And so I can imagine, and from experience, that just doesn't bode well. It's a strain. It is
Yeah.
a weight on the relationship that makes it so much harder when you're just trying to get to know each other and actually live out in a marriage. And so for you, you get to this place now that you've gone through, you didn't understand all this stuff, and you get divorced. And so you get divorced, and you're already in a place where this wasn't working. I have to imagine you feel like a failure in some ways. You feel
Oh boy.
so
Yes.
yeah, you feel like a failure. You feel like one, it's something that's going to happen very visibly in front of people. People will realize that you're not together
Yeah.
anymore, that somehow you failed, but you always had this need to feel affirmed as well. And so now feeling like a failure and needing that affirmation, that's just not a good combination. So you get divorced, and now you have to sit with yourself and understand what happened, but you also walking through the grief process. So when did you and how did you even get to the place of doing the work that you needed to do with the time that you had before you moved into another relationship?
So I think I started doing the work almost immediately. I was a counselor then, but
Okay.
you're not in a marriage you're too busy trying to save your marriage instead of trying to glean from it. So pretty much I remember sitting on my mother's bed, not my mother's bed, but I moved back in with my mother shortly after that.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting on my bed and I really wanted to kill myself. Honestly,
Mm,
I was sitting there contemplating it. Now, I'm not ashamed of it now. It's still a little shame that goes along that it got that bad. And
right.
my mother just walked in. My mother just happened to walk in the house and say, "What's wrong?" And I told her, my mother was just like, you know what, that's basically that's stupid. Okay. So so I actually started writing a book. And I started writing a book about the Bible and emotions. When I
Mm,
started writing this book about the Bible and emotions, it really started causing me to evaluate my own emotions. It started taking me back to things that have happened in my life that I decided I needed to do work around just
right.
as a counselor. And I was like, you know what? I have a lot of darn issues. I mean, separate from my marriage, I'm not saying in my marriage I was this rude guy because I've never been that mean guy, and I wasn't that guy in the marriage.
Right.
However, if I could have set some boundaries for myself, if I
Right.
could have set healthy boundaries, if I knew how to set them physically, I knew how to set them emotionally, if I knew how to stand up for myself in a proper way,
Mm-hmm.
if my priorities were straight, I probably wouldn't have had that issue. But I think I just got so down in the dumps, and I was saying, my God, you've been husband for this amount of time. What are you now?
Right.
Like, what are you now? You've been husband for all of this time, but what are you now? And that question right there is what made me dig. Like, there has to be more to me than husband. I was a man before that, so I decided to explore. I wanted to meet Mikal. Who are you? What are you about? What makes you tick? And then I figured out how it. See, I don't want to be accountable for ruining the whole marriage. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just giving you what I can own in the marriage. So
Absolutely.
that's what made me
Absolutely.
start doing it. That's what made me start doing
Okay. So now you're having this identity crisis along with this need for affirmation, this feeling like you're a failure. But you're also Christian, and your faith is important to you, and it's something that drove a lot of your decision making, even in dating and getting married. And so I'm curious about how the church supported you or did not support you through this process, because it's heavy, right? It's really heavy right now as you're trying to figure out, who am I again? Feeling like I failed. I mean, you just feel like that in terms of society, but definitely in the church, it's a stigma. It's a huge issue. So how did your church support you or not support you during this time when the marriage isn't working? It's still not working, so probably leading to a crisis, which winds up being a divorce, and then now you're trying to find your way back to a healthy place.
it. Okay. So my unhealthy perception of church is how I got in this situation. Okay. So now that I'm not, by the time I got divorced, my whole slant on Christianity had totally evolved. Like, it was totally something different from when I first got involved with God.
Okay.
I can say this: my church, I'm not speaking for everybody else's. My church was terrible at preparing you for marriage, and my church was terrible at helping you during divorce. Now, the reason why they're terrible at it is because they're not skilled at it. They're not
Right.
professional at it. The church thinks that because they know God, they know marriage, because they see marriage in the Bible. Well, the church sees God, but they don't think they know medicine. The church sees God, they don't think they know media. You know
Man,
what I'm saying?
preach.
But it's just something
Preach.
about marriage that since they see it in the Bible and it's God's idea, they think they understand it. And they had totally no understanding of it. And also, it's such a stigma attached to divorce. Very few people feel comfortable even starting that conversation with anyone in a church, because it's always, no, surely you just stay married forever.
Right.
What
Right.
God put together, let no man put it asunder. And they start throwing all this stuff at you. And honestly, Natasha, they were just terrible at it. They were terrible at it. There was no support either way, before or after.
I have to agree. I know there are plenty of ministries that have a great marriage ministry and do really good premarital counseling. But I remember going to my pastor as we were talking about premarital counseling. We had one session and it really wasn't very much. There was not a whole lot given. This man, great pastor, but he had been married probably, so many years before that I think he had a very outdated view that really didn't fit with where we were at the time. But our one little session, I got one good nugget in there from that one session, but then we didn't do any other counseling, any other therapy. But so let's go back. The church thinks they know marriage, as you said, but they don't think they know medicine. They don't think they know other things, or at least they recognize the need for outside trained professionals in those areas. But isn't marriage a religious institution? Isn't that something the church should know?
So these are slippery slopes for me because of my slant. But shoot, the church doesn't even know the Bible like they need to know it. Okay, we can start there. The foundational book. There's so many things we've extracted from it that makes everything cloudy, and it's just no different than marriage. When you look at what the Bible says about marriage, it doesn't really say a lot. When you really think about it, there's not a lot about marriage. There may be only 7 or 8 scriptures about marriage, period, in the Bible. There's not a lot about marriage in the Bible. So the fundamental issue is that in any relationship, you have will and skill. It's either a will issue or a skill issue. When I deal with my employees, it's the same way. Will issue, like you said, skill issue.
Yes.
That's right. So this is the issue with the church. People have the will to be married because the Bible says that it's better to marry than burn. Okay. I mean, that's, some people would say that. Okay. But the skill to be in a marriage, it takes skill to be married. It takes skill to communicate right. It takes skill to handle your wife. It takes skill to handle children. The church is excellent, at least at attempting to prepare a woman for marriage, at least telling her she needs to be modest, learn how to talk to your husband, and make sure you can cook, and all these gender roles that really are not.
That's submissive.
Yeah, that's submissive word. So they spend so much time trying to make a woman submissive that they don't empower her, and they spend so little time working on the men that he's too powered. So now when you get into marriage, the dynamic is just all messed up because we think it's a cookie cutter stencil for marriage, and it's really not. It's very individual specific, and the church is not very good at helping people be married to who they're married to.
Right.
They treat every marriage the same.
So did you go to your church for help?
No, I didn't go to my church for help, and I didn't want their help. Because of all my experiences with the particular church, I didn't want them to help me with it because, again, there's a stigma attached to it, number one.
Right.
And number two, they just want you to stay married. They're always trying to, when I talk to couples, I'm not trying to save your marriage. I'm trying to save two individuals in a marriage. And whatever decision they come to, that's what they come to. So I didn't come to the church because I know my church didn't have the skill to deal with it. And I don't think even after I got divorced, there was no help either. So I don't know how it would have been help when I was in it.
I feel like it's a huge gap in the church. We know that within the American society, half of us are getting divorced, but somehow we still have not figured out how to effectively minister to people who are walking through an experience that 1 out of 2 people are going to experience. And it's really weird. It makes no sense that we haven't figured that out and that we want to sort of bury our heads in the sand. That's how I felt a lot of times. So I didn't initially, in my case, I didn't go to my church because you guys probably don't, I haven't said this to the audience. My husband was the pastor. And so I wasn't
Right.
going back to the church at all. And sometimes it made me wonder, why do I even deal with the church at all at this point? But dealing with the church and having a relationship with that religious institution is quite different from your relationship with God. And I leaned on that relationship with God heavily and tried to find other places where I could go and be anonymous and just be ministered to, because that's what I needed at the time. There are not a lot of places, it wasn't that first lady thing but I felt like the church, in one way, I felt very betrayed by the church personally, because I had been there and not only had I lost a marriage, but I lost the church relationship and that community of what should have been support for me at the same time. So I could think I've been in that church maybe 20 years, and I could think of probably 5 people today, count on one hand the number of people that have contacted me to make sure that I was okay, to ask how I was doing or anything. Just people that I thought I had good relationships just disappeared. And, I was like, okay, I get it. I'm okay with that. I can move on. I can create my other life over here. But I feel like if you're not a person that's done that and your life is steeped in the church and that is your community of people, then man, are you in a terrible place when you're going through something and you don't have that support.
Yes. So it calls me, just like people do with their financial portfolios, I diversify. So
that's awesome.
Yes, I realize, because my church had been my primary community when I left college, and that was primarily my community. Right after that, I started getting involved in other things outside of church. And I realized that church is a supplement for me. It's not the main course of the meal I'm eating. It's part of my life, and it isn't my life. And like you said, I know that feeling of your community. I remember in my situation, one of my best friends since I was like 6 years old, and I have to be open about this. It had been lies told that I had sex with the person's best friend, and I used to beat on her. And I'm like, where's all this coming from? None of this even happened.
Sound like you.
Right, not at all. But a person the closest to me believed it, never checked in with me. And I noticed that people just started leaving my life. I'm like, man, even people from high school who we went to college with, because of the individual I was married to, they were related to her and knew her very well. And then when people finally learned the truth, they were like, oh my God, that was a lie. Wait a minute. You've been knowing me all this time, right? You haven't even ever saw me fight a person, let alone. So I know what you mean. There's this sense of like disconnection you get.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in your situation, since it was the whole church and it was the pastor, the whole dynamic was kind of like, you know what? There is no way anybody is pulling for me here.
Right.
Because one thing churches are set up to defend their pastor.
Uh-huh.
So that dynamic is, I thought that, but not on the marriage level. But I couldn't imagine that.
So you already knew the church wasn't going to be support for you. You didn't even go to them. You found support somewhere else. And you're working through, again, if we kind of come back to that story, when you're working through now, I'm having this identity crisis of who am I if I'm not a husband? I'm also realizing I have a whole lot of internal work to do that I haven't done before. And now it's clear to me that I need to start doing this work. And you're walking through this process. And so you take the time, you start working on it, you start understanding how you really feel about religion and what the Bible really says. You're dealing with these emotions, and you walk through that. So you get to this place now where you're kind of find it. You're. How did you get grounded? I guess I don't want to skip over that because it's
How did
this
I
is
get grounded?
yeah.
Just just honesty. The easiest way for a person to get grounded is just to be honest and make a choice.
Are you saying
It's
honest with yourself?
yeah, honest with myself
Mm-hmm.
and just make a choice. A lot of times when it's time for us to be honest with ourselves, we justify things. Well, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
this we either play victim or we justify our villain. Okay, so what I do is I justify my villain, and my victim I play victim. I just had to realize that I'm going to be the hero for myself. I'm just going
Yeah.
to rescue myself. Nothing else matters. And honestly, I just made a choice
Mm-hmm.
because me and my ex got separated. So the last 1.5 years of the marriage, we were separated, or
Mm-hmm.
the last year we were separated. I ended up getting married 2 years after my official divorce.
Okay.
So, which people go, well, that's kind of quick. Well, like you said, grounded. Once you're honest about things, once you know the part you played in it, sometimes forgiving yourself is a process
Yes, it
of
is.
life. You'll think you're over something on March 1st, and on March 31st, you realize you still haven't forgiven yourself. You never really get to the point where that's all the way done. That's a process. So to assume that all of that, I think what we do is when we view our lives from moment to moment, and we judge our life in that moment to be a certain thing, but we don't really look at the whole picture of it. So I pulled the lens in and then I pulled it back. And then I was just like, you know what? I know what I don't want. I know what I don't like. And I know who I am. So I thought that I could proceed forward.
Okay. All right. So you did. This is Tasha. You're listening to I Do, I Did, I Don't on What's in It for the Black People Media. We are talking with Mikal Harris about the male perspective on divorce, and we have gone from divorce to the church to the emotional work, but this is all part of it that needs to happen. And so I want to start, sort of shift a little bit because now you're remarried and you're starting this new relationship with everything that you've learned and all the work that you have done, and it seems like it's going pretty well.
It's going okay. I think I realized the first thing I realized was that marriage is work and work on myself is work. These are two things I always have to be committed to if it's going to work.
Amen.
So one thing I realized, this is gonna sound funny, and my wife Trina will tell you this. I did not get married for love because I realized that love is just a decision. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can love 1,000 people, but you can only be married to one.
Right.
Okay. So I realized that. So I went all the way to the opposite side of the spectrum when I picked a woman this time because I had
Okay.
a type. So the first thing you get rid of is what you think your type is. Types don't really mean anything. People think they have a type, and that is usually a superficial reason why you have a type. So God actually graced me to go exactly the opposite. I had a petite woman. I ended up with a bigger woman, a woman who talked too much, in my opinion, to a woman who hardly ever talked. Like everything was the exact opposite. Like, so I just decided that I was going to grow with someone. So
Uh-huh.
I'm going to grow with her, but I'm not going to build my life around. So my approach was different. And now that I'm in this marriage, I consistently work on myself. So I do more work on myself than I do my marriage. That's why it works. Most people do it the other way. They work on their marriage, but they don't work on themselves. So they don't
And
work.
you said a whole lot there and dropped some really, really important pieces that I want to just highlight again. Because what you said is love is a decision. And it's so true. It's just like belief. You choose what you're going to believe. You choose to love. Like you might have all of the butterflies and feelings and all those things, but though aside from those emotions, you choose that you are going to love and that you are going to be committed and that you are going to work on the relationship. And part of that is working on yourself. Something else that you said. I know that it's important for me to work on myself more than I work on the marriage. And I would say that for me, I did not realize that and certainly didn't think that way. I felt so indoctrinated in the church's way of doing things. And I think also this was my experience growing up and watching the relationships, the very dysfunctional relationships that I saw, that were marriages that I saw. But I felt like I couldn't even go on a trip without my husband. Like I couldn't even go and do a girls trip. It wasn't something that I did because it felt like that in some way that was sort of betraying the marriage. But you realize that this person, this relationship cannot give me everything that I want in my entire life. It will not meet all of my needs and all of the different facets of me. And if I take care of me and take care of those other things that I need, then I can show up better for the relationship. So it's that thing we hear all the time. You put your oxygen mask on first, and then you help the person next to you. And so,
Right, that's good.
Yeah, you just, I think sometimes we want it to work so badly that we continue to do the work on the relationship. We don't want to experience the failure. We don't want to admit that we have issues. There's this level of cognitive dissonance that's happening all the time.
Yes.
And it's as Black Americans, whole other topic, but I think we live in a perpetual state of that. You can't be Black in America and not have some level of cognitive dissonance when the society communicates one thing to you all the time and you're trying to still survive and make it and believe in yourself and all those things. So, we're steeped in that. And I think it finds its way into our marriages and our relationships as well.
Yeah.
And so we're now trying to navigate this, but also you realize something's not going right. And our default is, instead of working on ourselves, is to work on the marriage. And it just doesn't work. It does not work.
Yes, and some people are in love with being in love. They're not actually in love with the person they're with. They're just in love with being in love. Okay,
the idea of being married.
With the idea of it,
mm-hmm.
Right? Especially in a case like yours, where this is someone you've known like for forever, and everybody put a label and a stamp on that relationship, like this is gonna last forever, right here. This is my inspiration right here, right here, right here, right here. And to some extent, mine was like that because of how long I had known the person. Mm-hmm. We went to college together and all of that. But I realized I fell in love with the relationship, and fell out of love with me. So because the church teaches to become one, but it doesn't mean there's still not two people in it.
Man, say that.
So you know what I'm saying? It's two different people in this relationship. To become one, yeah, it sounds real good when you quote it and you get married, but in the lived experience, it's two becoming one, or it's two trying to make this work. That's what it is in reality. And I think if we just took the position that that we're going to work on ourselves. So like in the groups that I run, you're only allowed to speak in I statements. So it's impossible for you to even say you. So everything is dealt with from the I perspective instead of the you perspective is really strange. But me and my wife actually do that in conversation with each other, where it's everybody owning their own stuff, and it makes it easier to resolve a conflict. So,
Right. Very true. Very true. You're right in that, in saying that for me, it was, I had so many people. We had been together for so long. I think we started dating at the end of our first year of college. And I had so many people saying, man, you guys are the great example. If this doesn't work, nothing's going to work. I can't believe, this is who we're looking to as the great example of this Black love and Black married couple. And then it came crashing down. And for me, I was, while I was hurt and I was a little disoriented and upset, I was okay with where we were. I was okay with giving myself the time to heal, knowing that it was going to take time. I was okay with being absolutely pissed off and not apologizing for that, because that's just where I was, and I understood that it was going to take some time in order to heal, but that what I needed to prioritize was my health and well-being at that point in order
Yes.
to move forward with the rest of life. And it didn't matter to me what the church said or thought the process would be. I was just like, I'm not trying to hear that. I'm not trying to hear any of y'all, because right now what you want to tell me is to work on it to stay married. I'm done. I am done. Now let's talk about what the Bible says about divorce.
Right. How about done?
Exactly. Like this isn't a discussion anymore. I've made the decision I'm going to make, and I knew that God was okay with that. I knew what God has said to me personally. And so for other folks, it was like, well, you need to go, tell him to tell me the same thing he told you then. But I'm not trying to sit here and listen to, you need to stay married, you need to work this out. No, what you don't understand is, for me, this is killing me. It has been killing me for a long time. It has been taking away from the person that I am. But I made the decision to continue to do that. I made the decision to continue to sacrifice myself for the relationship, for the church, for the children, whatever reason. Everybody has these reasons of why we continue to stay in something that really isn't serving us well. And it was for this conviction that, no, you do whatever you need to do to make this work. You stay together. You sacrifice for the good of the marriage, as opposed to doing what you need to do for you. And while I was seeing a therapist and trying to work through it, there was so much stuff that just, had built up over the years, and so much stuff that I just needed to do work on. And now we had children, and there was work, and it became, it felt overwhelming at some point. And like, you know what, something has to change. Something has to change. And there was a catalyst for that change. And I felt, honestly, relieved. It was one of the first emotions that I felt. And I went, well, this is interesting. While, this hurts, I feel relieved and like, okay, this is, I know what it is. I can make the decision. I can move forward in what I want to do for myself and my life. And I honestly felt like my life gets better from here. It gets better. It doesn't get worse because I'm not married to this person. This marriage didn't define me while it was such a part of it. And I think people have been in awe of that, and just like, wow, somebody said to me, it's like you were just waiting for the divorce or something. No, it wasn't that. I never thought that it was actually that I would be in the position of getting divorced. I really didn't. But I realized how much it allowed me the space that I needed to grow. And as difficult as the experience was to walk through, I honestly wouldn't change it. I would not change it, because it highlighted areas of growth for me. It allowed me the time and space to be able to engage in that level of growth. And it allowed me to really understand what I believe and what my convictions are, really internally, as opposed to hearing this doctrine from the church that was feeding that to me. So I enjoyed, I shouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I did. I enjoyed the process of relearning, who is LaTasha? What is she like? What does she want? I realized at some point, if I were really going to work on this, and I was making a list of what I wanted, or people that, I would date, sad to say, this person wouldn't make the list. And that was a harsh reality. Like, and that's when I was like, I know it's been one. It's been one at this point, because I've grown, and I understand more about what I want. And I think there's still a lot to figure out, right? About what I want, and about the things that I need to do for me too. So, again, you did your work, and just let's talk about how all of that work has helped you now to have this marriage that, it is a lot healthier, and that is really serving you and serving her well at the same time, and the children, because you had 3 beautiful kids.
Well, the first thing I can say is you got to know how to pick fruit. So when you go to the grocery store, you don't pick a brown banana. You pick a banana that you can eat that lasts a little longer. So I think my selection process was different, but I think the biggest difference is that since I understand who I am, I don't walk into potholes that I would have walked into before. I know when I experience my anger or my sadness or my fear, and me and my wife are having a conversation, something triggers me. I can actually go, you know what? That energy is not about you. That's about me, and here's why. Like on a practical level, this is how our conversations go. Because I realize now she's not really stepping. People mistake their feelings for fact. So when you feel a certain, if you feel betrayed, it's a fact to you, but it's really not a fact. You just feel betrayed. So
Right.
I think that's the difference in my marriage now, that the conflict resolution with me and her is excellent. Like, I don't believe it's a conflict that we can't solve. And I just believe I'm so committed to me being a man of integrity, like me living in integrity with myself as a man, that it spills over into my marriage. And
Yeah.
she does the same thing. So we do the same type of work. We're involved in the same type of trainings and programs. She's going to staff a weekend for women at the end of March. And these are weekends that help people not only learn how to do this stuff, but it helps us all face our own lives so we can become better. So again, I think the magic of our marriage is that we work on ourselves.
Wow.
And we don't blame each other for what we're not or what we want to be.
We're going to have to share the information, because this is work that all of us could benefit from and really need to do in order to improve ourselves and thereby improve the relationships and the communities around us. I fully believe that when women are well, their communities follow, their families and their communities follow. But I believe the same is true for men. When men are well, then their families and their communities follow also. And so the level of work that you talk about doing to help you understand yourself and to really live in integrity as a man, and the work that your wife is doing to help you live in integrity as a woman and understand who you are is amazing work. So we'll have to share that with folks. This has been a really, really good conversation. I really thank you for joining us, Mikal, and for being so vulnerable, so open, and so honest to share that others could benefit and learn. That is why I do this show. Again, this is I Do, I Did, I Don't, and What's in It for the Black People Media. Thank you, Mikal. Appreciate you.
I'm available whenever you need.
All right, sounds good. We'll have to have you back for sure.
Tell Maze I said hi. I'm gonna call him.
I will do that. All right, listeners, Thank you for joining. I hope that this was helpful for you. Have a wonderful Sunday, and we'll see you again next week on What's in It for the Black People Media on I Do, I Did, I Don't.
You're walking my life and place the joy where was needed. I'm mirage what I feel for you. Put that on God, girl, I'm loving you. Said it's easy. It's easy to love. Easy to love. Said it's easy. It's easy to love. Easy to love. Oh yeah. Loving you has always been easy, cause you're beautiful. Loving you has always been wonderful, more than you'll ever know. We got good chemistry, go together like love says. Passion and care, we show one another, tops all the rest. The feelings I have for you, I ain't felt in so long. So what we share together, baby.